This is the 8-9 combo. I am Brett McKay, and it's wonderful to be back for another great rugby chat with my co-host who spent the weekend at the park with the rugby ball and the selfie setting, evidently. Harry Jones, what's been occurring there?
How's it, Brett? You try to get fit in one day. You do all sports in one day. So I did 2 hours of tennis. I did weightlifting. I rode my bike all over the place. And then I went out to the park and tried to replicate Le Garrick, which was the backward spiral 40-meter toss by the French 21-year-old French scrum-off. And I had a great fun doing it, actually. I was trying to do that thing, like the kids do, where they actually hit the camera with the ball or do something magical.
Right.
But after about 100
looked like
attempts,
you were falling well short of that.
Yeah, it was never coming close. But it was really interesting to do that for a while. And now I'm paying the price because I'm hobbled and feeling very sunburned.
Yes, and you have one dodgy shoulder now as a result. Yeah, exactly. Of course. We are up to episode 5 of the 8-9 Combo Rugby Podcast, and thanks for finding us under our new banner. All thanks to the Sports Social Podcast Network, and we are on all the pod platforms: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and their music varieties. What is left of Google Podcasts, Amazon, Audible, iHeart, literally wherever you get your podcasts. So please do like, follow, subscribe, rate, and review, and share it all. It really all does help. So, yes, you may well have listened to us on the Roar Rugby Podcast over the last few years, and we say welcome back if you did. But if you're completely new to the pod, we say welcome. And we obviously hope you'll stick around for this new journey of ours into the rugby pod world. Cheers and jeers, mate. It's the new name for the same way we've started the pod for a while. What have you got for me? What are you celebrating?
Let's see. So I think I'm going to cheer the drop goal. I'm going to cheer the drop goal in general, but also the particular exponent this week was Marcus Smith. What I liked about it was he was actually falling down. I went back and looked at the tape, and he was actually sitting on his arse when the ball went over, already celebrating. I like the shape of a drop goal, the finality of it. I think it's interesting. I think there's nothing quite like it in other sports. And just the feeling that probably the English supporters have, and we never really say nice things about England, but let's say this now must have felt really good at Twickenham, following all this stuff. Wallaby fans can commiserate to have something like that happen, where you have the penalty advantage, you're right in front of the poles, you're probably going to make it, and then you make it. It's gotta feel good. The drop goal is like just slots it and says, "Walk off, we win." I like it.
I think it's one of the most underappreciated skills in rugby. And whenever there are conversations about drop goals can't be worth 3, we've got to drop it. Anyone who's suggesting the drop goal should be worth less than 3 points has A, never kicked one, but B, has not actually considered the skill and the bravery involved in slotting that drop kick over with defense on you, right on you. They're not back 15 meters. They are right on you, and that's
so just do it. If people don't like it, I think it's to try to do it. And the setup is hard. You have to have a dominant ruck. You have to have perfect clear space.
Exactly.
And your 9 has to hit it just right. Would have been nicer if he'd done the backward flip since they had advantage. Just like, hey, I see you, Le Garrick.
Between the legs, Harry Wilson started 2 weeks ago.
I did try drop goals as well. You can see that on my socials. So go on my socials and see me do the backward flip and the drop goal. It's not very pretty.
or maybe don't. It's funny that should be your cheers, because my cheers tonight is on behalf of England prop Joe Marler, who shared video of himself eyeing off a decent gap, one pass off that very ruck, only for Danny Kerr to find Marcus Smith for the drop goal. And he said, 0 points in 92 tests. It's bollocks to you, Danny Kerr and Marcus Smith. I was walking it in if I managed just to catch it.
I love that.
It was a decent gap he was eyeing off too.
I don't always love Marler, but I thought that was genius.
That was good. I was pretty happy with that. We've got something new to try out this week, haven't we? The 8-9 of the week. What have you got for me? Do we need like special music or something for this? Like what have you got?
We do need special music, and probably Chook needs to have another stinger or something. My 8-9 combination of the week is from the Fijian Drua. Number 8, Meli Derenalagi, captain, the skipper, sets up a scrum, and he's got Frank Lamani behind him, the man of the match. They're in Lotoka. The crowd is going crazy. It's pivotal. The scrum sets, and what Meli does is he comes off the back on a feint, does a pirouette and entirely takes everyone with him. All the Crusaders go with him, which is legal. It's okay to faint if you're the number 8, not the 9.
Ah, right. Okay, this is going to be my question. I saw this, and was it
subtle
legal?
nuance? And number 8s are known. We are known for our nuance and for our delicacy. Pirouette and take everyone with it, and then the blunt, crude number 9 read it in and scored.
You're known for a lot of things. I'm not sure that subtlety and delicacy is two of them. Okay, I like that.
It was a beautiful set move. I loved it.
I like that. And we are all here. We are here, obviously, for 489 celebrations. So we will absolutely doing more of that every week. But let's get straight.
It was short side, which you love. Sorry.
It was absolutely. We love a bit of short side stuff. Looking forward to this week's guest, mate. Another 8-9 debut for another of our favourite guests from the past few years. And look, frankly, incredible that he's been able to fit us into his busy schedule. He'll join us in just a moment. He will join us in just a moment. The rugby fan has been blessed for quality rugby content to start 2024, and we definitely wanted to get into it all, but we wanted to write the person for this discussion, and we've definitely got him now. If you think about rugby coverage in Australia, it's hard to think of anyone other than the new face of Stan Sport. Please welcome onto the 8-9 combination for the first time this year, Michael Atkinson. Hello, mates.
Cool.
Good to be back. I prefer you refer to me from now on as undroppable.
Well, we'll see how this goes to determine just how undroppable you are.
There's been no mention yet of my title there below my name, and I'm a little disappointed.
We often don't reference titles unless we feel like we need to. We don't always do it. You are, of course, referring to, frankly, a quite incredible 2-year run as the starting winger in the Roar Boars, the fictional team that we picked for 2 years, and I suppose that means that makes him an incumbent, Harry, in our new team.
Yeah, the 89ers are a strong team. We have a great second row. We have Sir Bill Beaumont, and we have Simon Rawalui. We have some scrappers, but now we have a genuine versatile, the kind of guy you need if you can do a 7-1 bench or 6-2 bench. Atco's your man. You can put him in any position. He has that chiseled jaw. He has the shape. He looks, on the training paddock, he looks very much like a quick winger. So I understand he's
winner as well. Quick winner.
Oh, wow.
Deceptively slow, but he is demanding a $2.6 million pay, and this is one of the holdups this year. That's where the money went for Australia.
That feels like unapproved spending. No, but look, thanks so much for joining us, mate. We spoke to you just before you headed to France last year for the World Cup, and I very specifically asked you if Nick McArdle knew that you were gunning for his job. But since then, you've joined Stan Sport full time. You're literally front and center leading the coverage. Can Nick not see what you're doing now?
You know that Kermit the Frog gif?
Yeah. I don't know.
No. No, Nick and I are a wonderful 1-2 combination. Him being 1, me being 2, and got an excellent working and personal relationship, and that's not gobbledygook. That's not corporate gobbledygook. But the truth of it is, the truth of it is, I genuinely would not be where I am without Nick McArdle. I'm not going to bore you with the whole story, but when I first decided in my late 20s that I wanted to get into media and have a crack at eventually, hopefully one day getting to a position like this, apart from my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I reckon Nick was the next person I spoke to about it. It was in London during the 2015 World Cup. I reached out, and then we had a few beers, me and him and Andrew Swain, and chatted about the whole thing, and he gave me heaps of advice. And then from that moment on, whenever I needed to pick his brain or ask advice or run something by him or see how he does this or does that, he was always available. Like, to the point where when I was an intern back at the Reds in media and doing weekly Queensland Premier Rugby wraps, like 60 seconds of what happened on the weekend and who was playing in the week coming, I would send them to Nick, and he would get back to me always within a week. Sometimes it was the next day, sometimes it was, a few days, but always within a week, he'd come back to me and be like, try this, do this bit was good.
Yeah, right.
Do this. So I genuinely would not be here without him.
He's a good man, Nick McArdle.
Was it stuff like whites in your teeth? Look, your teeth are as white as your AirPods, which is amazing.
How do I brush my hair? sort of
which side did he say? Yeah.
What sort of? Yeah. Well, he clearly said brush it to your right, which I think is how I have it. But the old reverse mirror on the camera might tell you otherwise. What foundation to use? All that sort of stuff.
There's even a cartoon of you, I understand.
Thankfully, I didn't take his advice on antiperspirants. If you paid attention to round one at Suncorp Stadium when it was genuinely stinking bloody hot. Here is his advice.
Oh, look at that!
Oh, that's beautiful.
Look at that
with the spectacles.
Superman. That's awfully self-indulgent, isn't it? Very good, very good. No, he is a genuinely one of the most generous people in media, and I've experienced that myself. So I absolutely stand for that, which will be an awful shame that you use that against him when you do ultimately roll him. That was worth it just to see that.
I nearly ruined a computer just then. I very nearly ruined a computer.
Same way he's kept his spot on our team for 2 years now without ever making a tackle. It's great.
That was so good. This is that's been cut up for social media already. I can hear it.
On that point of not making a tackle, I'll tell you a quick story of when I did play long time ago, and we went on a regional tour. Just whoever wanted to go pay their way to Gundawindi, from Brisbane to Gundawindi, and we went out and played the local side on the border there, the border town of Gundawindi, and then it was like basically a weekend of get on the piss, and included the BNS. And on the second day, the guy who'd organised the tour was a bit of a club legend. He'd played a lot of first grade, but that season he'd played second grade with me, and he was on the other wing. And he had a lot. And I said something, thought I was joking, but he took it the wrong way. And he just flipped and he just ripped into me, and he was like, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And at the time I was working at the QRU, and he's like, you work for the QRU, which I hate. And then he goes, and you didn't make a single tackle all year. Which obviously he'd had enough, and he just let it all out. And I was like, well, look, accurate, fair enough.
When the other winger is ripping into you about your defense, you know you've had a bad run.
No, but it's also part of relationships. A killer is that if you keep score, you should never keep score with a friend.
Oh no, but if you are going to keep score, it's the opposite.
Like mention the stats, like the stats of the year. You never apologized one time this year.
Yeah,
he made the tackles. I scored the tries. That's how it went.
There you go. Well, mate, as I mentioned, 2024 is the year of the rugby doco, and we have been blessed. The Wallabies doco came out the week of Super Rugby. By that point, we'd already seen Six Nations Full Contact on Netflix. Whistleblowers was already out on RugbyPass. How much, I'm wondering, of the timing of the release for the Wallabies doco was based around the others? Did you know the others were coming at that time?
I didn't. I mean, I knew obviously about Full Contact. I knew that was coming for a while. That had been mooted for, I don't know, I think maybe I'd heard it at least 12 months ago.
Yeah. It was certainly been reported last Six Nations that the Netflix crew were in train. Yeah.
Yeah. So I knew that one was coming. I didn't know the referees one was coming until a couple of days before it actually dropped. So I'm not sure if the timing had anything to do with it. I think the timing maybe had more to do with Super Rugby Pacific.
Yeah.
I think it, and genuinely speaking from a position of having no oversight of any of those decisions, I think it probably had to do with like, well, rather than drop it in the middle of nowhere, let's drop it somewhere that is going to tie into what's to come and tie into rugby that's on the horizon, and sort of like it's another way of generating interest before Super Rugby Pacific kicks off. I'd say it had something to do with that.
Yeah. How did it go down? My understanding is that it was pretty well performed in terms of stand programming in general, not just sport.
I think it's been. I think it's done really well. I've been quite interested to see some of the commentary around it, like being from what I've seen, generally positive. Because we'll get into it a bit longer, but later. Sorry, but I got a small, I got a preview like a very short time before it came out, like maybe a week or something like that. And discussed it with a few other people who'd seen it, and we were all a bit like, oh, really interested to see how people react.
Yeah, right. Okay.
But I don't think they reacted. The majority of people reacted the way I thought they were going to react. So yeah, but I think it's been a winner for Stan, and also the fact that it was on Stan and not Stan Sport, so sort of anyone with a Stan subscription but didn't have the sport add-on, which you should have. If you want my kids to eat dinner, you should have it. Well, yeah, I think that's helped, and so it should. Like it's Again, we'll get into it deeper, but
we will. It's
groundbreaking.
Absolutely, and I actually hope. I don't think Joe Schmidt will go for it at all, but I actually hope that they did it again this year to see the contrast. What have we made of the others, Harry? We've actually been waiting for a few weeks to talk about Full Contact and Whistleblowers. You sat through them all within the space of a couple of days, didn't you? You just went on full rugby doco binge mode, didn't you?
Yeah, my friend Porkchop set me up with a secret Stan Sport subscription, which I was allowed to do illegally, but I still pay, so it's kind of okay. I just pay Atco directly. It's fine. So I wonder about
as we're doing tonight.
I wonder what makes a good documentary in general, and I think it's when I think about it, it's that you think you are seeing something that you weren't allowed to see. I think it's the peek behind the curtain, right? And then in a sports sense, if it's your own team, you kind of watch anything. You watch dog shit, doesn't matter. It's like, oh, there's my guy. So if you're targeting the casual fan or the fan that's into the sport in general, but not into that particular guy, then you want to see Michael Jordan, betting with parking attendants and to show how competitive he is, how ridiculously competitive he doesn't even like to lose a simple game of flipping a coin to a wall or something. So I think in that sense, Whistleblowers was the best because it took you into worlds you hadn't seen before. The footage was remarkable. I think that's also part of it, is show me a view of a rugby match that I think I've seen, or in my case, I was at, and then you actually see Ben O'Keefe walking out the tunnel. And so you are Ben O'Keefe. I think that's brilliant. I don't think you could have a series on it. It's sort of a one-off expose of I didn't even agree with some of the points actually, but I thought it was so well done I didn't care. To make refs even more famous and expose more of their personal life, and then go, but people are going to be mad at you when you make a big decision. It's kind of naive, but I do think it was a good doco, edited well, found the right people. I think the Wallabies one certainly, it had a perspective of, what is Eddie? Like, who is he really? And how bad was he, right? So it didn't really go that far because I think it was a little bit impossible to get Eddie. So the one where he's like, where's the tea? Where's the tea? That's sort of like moments, right, where you kind of see, how he might roll. But I think maybe would have loved to see more of the young guns. I think they've been maybe a little more funny on camera. We know some of them obviously are that way, so I think maybe that was one issue, but it was so much better than the Full Contact Six Nations, which was super forced and didn't have anybody that I really wanted to see. It was, I don't know, it was just kind of a loser to me.
See, Full Contact for me is, and I think back to the first season of Drive to Survive, the Formula One series, and all of the Netflix ones that have followed, and it's Full Contact, it's Full Swing, the PGA one, it's, I can't remember what the tennis one's called, Quarterback, the
Breakpoint,
the NFL one, Breakpoint it is too.
Breakpoint.
The Breakpoint I'm actually not overly fussed about, and I think I've heard that it's not coming back for a third season. Quarterback is interesting. I'm into that at the moment. Full Swing I enjoyed, the golf one, and it confirmed a lot of my preconceptions about certain players, almost all of them, in fact. But the first season of Drive to Survive, Ferrari and Mercedes didn't want anything to do with it initially. And so what you got in the first series was the other 8 teams. And I was like, what do we think of this? But what emerged over that first series was, okay, right, this is what happens, 7 garages down the lane. And this is what happens, to the bloke who's 18th fastest on the grid. And that actually made it more appealing, I think. And it took exactly milliseconds, I would suggest, for Ferrari and Mercedes to get interested in the second season. So Full Contact, I think, is going to have to do something similar if there is to be a second season of it. The way that it's been focused on a single player in a single team, I sort of get where they're going at, but I think they need to go a bit wider on that. Whistleblowers, I have to admit, I actually haven't seen it all. Yeah, I watched about the first 20 minutes, and initially I was thinking, I think I'd like that to have been a series, but I tend to agree with you. I think keeping it short and sharp probably makes it better. So
you'll like it when you watch it.
Yeah.
So on the Wallabies, I'm interested what Echo thinks about this. I actually thought, they probably shielded the young guns like Carter Gordon and
that
Ben
felt
Donaldson,
deliberate
those
to
guys.
me.
But I feel like that would have been the big watch to see how did it feel to be, replace Quade Cooper, go in there, 4 or 5 caps, and then run into the cauldron. Was there an attempt to get more of the players involved? Do you know?
I'm not sure. Like, I think a lot of the one-on-one interviews were all kind of predetermined.
Like Nick White. Nick White was obvious.
Yeah, like Nick White, Alan Alator, Hoops, Slips, those guys. Because that's one thing I've seen commentary after people saw it. They're like, I wanted to hear from Will Skelton after he got injured, and I wanted to hear from this person and that, like based on things that happened in the World Cup. And I think a lot of that stuff was like predetermined, pre-agreed.
Yeah.
There's probably stuff around collective bargaining agreements, I imagine, made like that had to be considered or had to be ticked off. So I think that's sort of why you didn't, like, all of a sudden when you knew there was a storyline that happened at this point of last year, that you could speak to that person or hear from that person. I'm not sure exactly what happened behind the doors, but I'm pretty sure a lot of those sort of like individual interviews and who they were going to talk to more regularly were predetermined. Like, I assume that has to be the case, because otherwise why wouldn't you hear from Dave Parecki, who all of a sudden becomes captain halfway through the tour?
Cooper, exactly right. Yeah, it's a fair point. So, what did we think of the time frames? Like, do you think there were areas they could have gone into deeper in the run up to it felt to me like it became obvious that there had to be a pivot in the storyline.
Yeah.
That was what it was. That surely I'm not the only person seeing that.
I felt like because I think it was always slated for 3 episodes. That was like the original plan. And again, I'm not privy to the production meetings and what was negotiated and that sort of stuff. But I think there's a strategy around the 3 episodes. I think that 3 episode series do quite well. What one did they have? What other one did they have in the last 12 months or something that was 3 episodes? Anyway, moving on.
Sure. A lot of the political ones. There was the one on the ABC about the end of the Scott Morrison prime ministership, Harry. It's sort of been a bit of an ongoing series over the last 20 years. In fact, this was the latest chapter, and that was another 3 episode one.
Yeah, and crime. I think crime stories, sometimes they do a 3-parter, and it's dramatically different. Like what you thought you were watching in the first show is so different by the third.
Yeah. So the other one I was thinking of was another Stan original, was the Dawn of the Dolphins, the one they did on the new rugby league team, which came out just before the season started last year. That was 3 episodes. I think it was always slated to be 3 episodes. When I watched it, one of my criticisms was they took too long to get to the World Cup. Like they spent more time on the build up to the World Cup than the World Cup itself. When that was the story in the end. Like, it might not have been the story when you started planning it, but that was the story in the end, was like the capitulation at the World Cup. So it almost could have, I don't know, I wonder if it could have been 2 episodes based on like from when Eddie flips his lid at the airport. That's the beginning of episode 2. And from there, it's like they spend 2/3 of the whole series from that point onwards. Because I just felt like there was a bit too much time spent on
the third one.
Rugby championship games
felt rushed. And so as a result, the Japan debacle felt almost washed over. Like, it was the story broke midway through the 3rd episode, and we got a denial, and that was kind of it. And that was the case where, like, this is where we need to hear from players, and this is where we need to hear from the other members of the coaching staff, and this is where we need to hear more from Phil Waugh and, even Hamish McLennan. So I don't know. I think that's what I mean by the preconceived narrative suddenly had to go to a different finishing point.
It could have been a funny narrative if they just took the expenditures basis and the bottom of the screen just rolled the numbers. So you see, I mean,
just going up, just ticking up like a poker machine.
Atco and I crossed paths in Saint Etienne at a burger joint. I don't know. It didn't look like the whole setup of the Wallabies in Saint Etienne was just rolling through millions. I don't know. It's kind of weird that it didn't.
And
It
let's be transparent here, Harry. Rugby Australia did not pay for our burgers and beers that day, so that's not part of the $2.6 million overspend.
Who knows?
Yeah. That's just let's be clear here. That's just the unauthorized overspend.
I'm just
overspend up to that
I'm
point.
Trying to protect Harry here. I don't want anyone to think that Harry is responsible for eating $2.6 million worth of burger and beers.
You're talking about a bloke who has blown travel budgets for the last 2 years and already for the next 3. So overspending in Harry is just something I expect.
But we have no approval process, so nothing can be unapproved because nothing is approved.
Hence me staying in this bloody office for 100+ episodes.
But I mean, my point is, like, it didn't seem like the Wallabies were rolling like heavy hitters, like bowlers. No. It's weird that it was 2.6 over, and Jeff Park says it's more than that. So
I think some of it, and like, this is speaking again without authority, but just based on stuff I've heard, which I imagine you guys have too. I think some of the spend came from some ridiculous things like last minute changes of hotels and travel and logistics. And, we all know how expensive it is to change a flight for one person, let alone maybe 40 people. If that was included in it, I'm pretty certain that in either Melbourne or Sydney, one of those 2 tests they played in Australia last year, Eddie didn't like the hotel. And so they made like a last minute change of hotel for a traveling party of what? Like staff and players 50? Be 50.
Yeah, easily.
I think they took quite a few people, staff and players, to South Africa. Now Sanzar covers a lot of that, but I think they cover it to a degree. Going back to my team management days with the Reds, they would cover like 26 players and 10 staff or something like that. And if you wanted to take more...
The Wallabies took a squad of about 36, which included 5 blokes that were never going to play.
Yeah. And then however many, we all know Eddie was surrounded by significant number of staff. So I think that those sort of things, they rack up costs pretty quickly.
I wonder if he changed the hotel because he wanted tea. And he was like, where's the effing tea? Bring the tea, right? Why would you change a hotel? Like, what do you need? Good. Just a bed and a toilet. It's players, man.
I don't know.
Yeah, you'd think it's got to have the right coffee. Just going back
to
the docos,
didn't it? Really worked.
Yeah. There was leniencies given. I think it's the word that we've been given. Just going back to the docos, Atco, what has been the general feeling within Stan Sport? Is this the sort of thing that you guys would like to see more of? And is there discussions taking place to try and get a follow-up for it?
No idea if there's any discussions taking place, but I think general consensus is we'd like to see more of that stuff. I mean, just look at even the broadcast this year. We're trying to try new things for rugby, at least, like, rugby league coverage has gone into the sheds into the winning sheds after a game. We're miking up coaches for a whole match and then, not showing that live, but we put together that package on Kiss and Coleman, which was awesome.
Which is good,
I think they tried to do the same thing with some players in a trial match. I think Tane Edmund of the Tars and Bella McKenzie, the weekend that they played out at Roma, just to sort of see how it would go. So I think ideally maybe would like to do that one day. So I think like that's a clear indication that what we're trying to do is give the viewer more insight on the inside and what happens behind closed doors or how things operate. So I'd imagine that these sort of documentaries there'd be more of them coming.
All part of it. Yeah. That
make it very personal, Atco. Like why Ned Hannigan would be a better boyfriend for Taylor Swift than Travis Kelce. Things like that. That's what we want to see. Also, I think Tane Edmund would be box office. I think he's got a very highly expressive face. Maybe you could do something like the Young Guns, because all the fly-offs now in Australia are kind of positioned equally. You got Noah, you got Tane, you got Ben, you got Carter. Who else? Lina. Like, who's going to emerge?
Yeah.
Donaldson, yeah. Just 10 watch, just an hour.
Should we
10
call it FH10? You know, like QB1. We'll call it FH10.
Yeah,
Could be.
exactly.
Could be.
Nah, that's a terrible name. Just scrap it.
Are you
we'll
writing this
put
down?
it on the whiteboard, Michael. We'll put it on the whiteboard.
Yeah, good. Yeah, no, good. This sort of leads us into the stand coverage this year, because suddenly you've gone from, you know, Rugby Heaven and Shawnee show of a Monday to something every night, every week. And so, like I mentioned, like I think I counted, there's at least 10 different Australian podcasts, and I might even be missing a couple there now, including Inside Line that you and Sam Worthington and Tom Decent Pato are doing. So there's 10 or a dozen podcasts out. You guys have got programs 4 nights a week, and then obviously into the games across weekends. That feels like a concerted effort from Stan.
Yeah, firstly, just thanks for plugging the podcast. I really appreciate it. As a competitor, you're still willing to do that.
We expect reciprocal rights, obviously.
That was part of the contractual agreement of me coming on to this.
Competitor.
It was,
competitors. in the same way that in a family of 4 boys, you might have the oldest who's 15 and the youngest who's 5. They're competitors in backyard footy.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, it is concerted. I think what they saw last year during the World Cup, because we did something every day, like they had Monday Rugby World Cup Central, between two posts, Tuesday Rugby World Cup Central, Wednesday Central as well, Thursday Heaven, Friday. You know, there was sort of like, there was Stan Shorts in there.
I'm glad you're battling a bit with this, because I couldn't keep up, and I'm already struggling to keep up now, 3 weeks in. So
really easy now, mate, because they've all got different names. Between 2 posts on a Monday, Rugby Heaven on a Tuesday, the call up on a Wednesday, and the night before game day on a Thursday. Yeah, there you go. I think what they discovered at the World Cup was that the appetite for content every day was quite apparent, and there was good streaming numbers. I think they were just received really well, and also because they were sort of shorter, sharper bites. So you'll notice that like Rugby Heaven this year is like half an hour tops, 30 minutes tops. I think between 2 posts is like we're pretty much aiming for nothing more than 30 minutes. They're just easier to consume. And you know what I've found out? Like, I'm a bit embarrassed to admit this, but I've admitted it to my boss anyway.
There's no better place to do it, mate.
Less admitted it and more got like called out. So I recorded Rugby Heaven last week with me and Timmy, and Joe Schmidt was our special guest, and Demi Hayes. And when walked off set, and the Wallabies media manager, Marty Cambridge, he goes, "Do you guys do that as a podcast?" And I went, "I don't think so." And he's like, "Oh, you should turn it around as a podcast. Like, people will listen to it, you know, if they can't watch it or whatever." And I was like, "Oh, it's not a bad idea." And I went to the EP of rugby and I said, "Hey, we should turn Rugby Heaven into a podcast. Like, just put the audio out there." And he's like, "Mate, we've been doing it since the beginning."
Yes.
Do you
I was like, that's because I've always subscribed.
I'm still new here. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Do you consciously try to speak differently in poddies than when you're on the TV? Like, it seems like it's a different syntax, no? Or is it the same?
There's not a lot of difference between this podcast voice and TV voice, let me tell you.
No, like the way you get around things, the way you like. It seems like TV land is much more obvious that you're performing, and isn't podding a little bit more like, we're just talking here.
Yeah, I think it's the setting. You know, like when you have a conversation with people you don't know versus conversation with people you do know, you probably change a little bit as well. You do perform when there's a camera on. Like, I mean, one of the things in TV is, and I've struggled to learn this or struggled to grasp this when I first started, but I now teach, like, if there's young people coming through, you always feel like you're over the top in TV if you're afraid of being over the top because you sound to yourself like you're trying too hard or you're a bit of a dick. But then when it comes through, like if you go and listen to the recording or watch the recording, you're flat. So you always try to be 10, 15% more than you are normally. So that happens a bit in TV, where it's also like with shows, things are not scripted but programmed. Like we're like, right, we're going to talk about this here, and then we've got to move on. We've got to go to this next. Whereas I guess with the podcast, you're just naturally more conversational.
Yeah, and it's true on interviews too. You know, I do interrogations for a living. So I'll put the camera on and then I'll pretend that I turn it off. And I go, let's just turn it off. Just talk to you and I. And then they always tell you the real stuff then.
Yeah. It's certainly, yeah. That's the magic of TV. And there's the break.
Don't pretend to turn it off and think you're going to get anything different out of me about Nick.
Yeah. No,
who are all the dicks in Aussie rugby?
All still going in the full Unfettered YouTube channel, and get over everyone who is watching.
I did unintentionally get Warren Gatlin in a firestorm. We'll talk about that well.
You did. We will. Atco, it feels like Super Rugby Pacific has surged on field this year. What's the impact been like for you guys as broadcasters?
All really positive. You know, the games are 3 weeks in, are more entertaining. They seem to be, generally speaking, closer contests, more competitive. So naturally that makes people more interested. And I think, you know, touch wood, fingers crossed, that continues week on week. The general perception around rugby will turn more and more positive. I think one of the biggest things that rugby struggles with in Australia is because we haven't been overly successful and our Super Rugby teams have struggled when we play the Kiwis, for instance. You get to the end of the weekend and it's not like, my team lost. It's like, Australian rugby sucks.
It's like all our teams lost. Yeah.
All our teams lost, or 3 out of 4 of our teams lost. Whereas you look at the AFL, like it's never like if there's, let's say there's 9 bad games, no one's really like, Australian rules sucks, because their team, one person's team still won.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the NRL. You know, there might be a few people in the media, like Buzz Rothfield or someone on NRL 360. And the game's just not what it used to be anymore.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens in rugby. So as long as we can stay competitive and start winning, I think it changes the perception. People buy in more. But overly, the first 3 weeks have been really positive. It's been, the rugby's been awesome. Super Round was incredible.
It was. And even the weekend just gone, like the biggest winning margin, Harry, was the Drua beating the Crusaders by 10 points. So that's the biggest margin for the weekend. So
wow.
Like I think it was only 30 odd points across 6 games. So you got to be you're curious about this, Harry, aren't you? Whether New Zealand teams are
on the gap, right? So the whole overarching meta narrative about Super Rugby is always about, from an Australian perspective, is how much of a gap is it between us and the Kiwis. It's going to be forever, every season thing, and it seems like early results are that the gap has shrunk. Now the question is that because the teams like the Crusaders have fallen off a cliff? Is that because maybe there's been a slip on the Kiwi side with the exodus of so many stars to Japan, or just, I don't know, whatever, just cycles? But it does feel like Aussie teams are up, which is interesting, following all this doom and gloom. We just talked about the documentary, and now suddenly you have Harry Wilson, as fit as a man can be, looking like he was still charging at the end as the Reds put the Chiefs away. He was noticeably fitter than Jacobson, for example. So it's interesting if there's been a fitness uptick, if maybe guys like Les Kiss have brought an infusion, or if there's just, the natural part of life, of cycles of sports, right? So I don't know, but I would say early results are good. A guy like Ned Adigan, for example, I think is noticeably stronger, quicker to the ruck. There's just individual players. You can look at Tate, McDermott maybe, who look like they're motivated. And you look at the Six Nations, just to divert, the French seem like they just were destroyed by the debacle of 2023, whereas the Irish seem like they were buoyed by it in some ways, and maybe England too. So maybe Aussie rugby is like, enough is enough. Let's go.
Line in the sand.
They look just as good, big, strong, and physical as the Kiwi teams. It's always been about the mentals. Always been about that. New Zealand teams seem to make good decisions under pressure quickly, and that's always been the difference. So it's very heartening to see some of these young players step up. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it sustainable, or are we going to have one of those inevitable Kiwi backlashes?
God, I hope so. God, I hope it's sustainable. Not that we are going to have a Kiwi backlash. It feels to me, Echo, like the trajectory is genuine, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably still a bit scarred like most people from years gone by or even last year. So I'm trying not to count my chickens. But I think the most conclusive answer I can give you is the distance from Sydney to New Zealand is 2,224 kilometres. So that's the distance between New Zealand rugby and Australian rugby.
Oh, so precise.
You can write that. You can write that on the whiteboard and cross it out later.
Thanks, Clark Kent.
I hope it's sustainable, but I'm like Brett. Like I'm not riding off the Crusaders. I'm not getting too ahead of myself. We haven't really played in New Zealand yet either. Just trying to think. The Rebels are the only team so far that have.
Yeah.
And they played
Brumbies
Moana
this week.
Brumbies, yeah, they got the Highlanders, don't they?
Yeah.
When Clark Kent reported the dimensions of the ditch.
That's the Dutch. Like I want to be optimistic and say it's closing or we're on a upward trajectory. I don't want to think for a second that it's more the Kiwis going backwards, because I think I think that's just not possible. How many times have they turned over legends and they still get better and better anyway? Yeah. So I don't think the exit is really an issue. Maybe they're a bit slow to start this year, maybe not. But I think the Aussie teams are playing well. Like the Force aren't going that great. They probably could be 2-1, but the Reds are playing well. The Tars are playing well. The Rebels have sort of found their groove, but whether or not they've really been tested yet is a big question mark. And then I'm not really sure where the Brumbies are at, but a bit like not riding off the Crusaders, I wouldn't ride off the Brumbies, because I think system-wise they're just so strong.
And they were saying on the weekend that they will get more out of scrapping to that win over the Force by 3 points than had they have blown them away, probably.
Yeah.
And it's not unlike the Australian cricket team at the moment. Anytime you're finding a win and you're not playing particularly well, that's probably a good thing. It's curious to see how it continue and how that then translate into national squads and things. What have you guys made of Joe Schmidt so far? Do you like what you're hearing? What's he been like to deal with?
He's just not Eddie. He's just in every way the opposite.
That's the big difference. Yeah.
So I think he's fulfilling his remit so far. Just, no drama, sound reasonable. When you go on a show, don't make it all about you. It looks like he's the kind of guy that assistant coaches might want to work for. The documentary, to me, one of those takeaways was, like, there's just no assistants. Like, assistant coaches are a nullity. It's just pure Eddie and a shrink.
I still didn't know who the assistant coaches were by the end of it. I knew Dan Palmer, but that was easy.
So the loud whisper about Lord Laurie coming back is obviously a good sign. He just looks like a guy who knows how to build something slowly.
Let me speak completely out of turn here. Laurie Fisher is part of our ABC radio broadcast team in Canberra this year, and I've walked out the back of Canberra Stadium with Laurie and Tim Gavel on Saturday afternoon, and Joe Schmidt's down there, had been in town watching the game. Laurie Fisher and Joe Schmidt greeted each other like two blokes who've spoken a lot about rugby this year already. Like there's just, and we grilled him on air, and he just said, I can neither confirm nor deny. So look, I think that just feels.
I was waiting for some really
very,
dark
very
revelation
obvious
in the story. I thought like they had fisticuffs or something.
No, okay. The revelation is that if that deal isn't done already, it's not far off, I'm sure.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe's pragmatic enough to know that if there's someone in Australia whose brain needs picking, it's Laurie, and the fact that he's not employed anywhere full-time, at least in a rugby sense, then I think Joe's smart enough to realise he needs to do everything he can to get him under the tent. I've been impressed by him, but again, I'm cautious because 12 months ago I was really optimistic about Eddie, and even when they lost their first 2, 3, 4 games of the Rugby Championship in the Bledisloe, I think I wrote a column being like, everyone, get on board, stay on board. There's improvements, blah, blah, blah.
And they're the worst.
He's clearly not Eddie.
No.
And I think to your point, Harry, about assistants are going to want to work with him. I think that's going to be a huge difference.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest issues from the outside of the Wallabies last year.
I had a quick chat with Joe, and so did a lot of people in that sort of 10 or 15 minutes that I was sort of nearby. And he very carefully and very deliberately listened to everyone, said hello, how you going, posed for photos, no problems at all. But what I noticed was that he stood there and he listened. And people said a lot of things to him, and I'm sure some of it might have even made sense, but he stood and listened to it all. And I think that's probably going to be the big difference. And he said from the outset that I'm not Eddie Jones. I am going to be more pragmatic. I am going to have a lot of conversations and listen to people. He's like he said from the outset that he wanted to have a chat to the 5 state coaches to hear from them, not to talk to them, but to hear from them. And it's more in line with how Dave Rennie operated. And I don't think that's surprising to anyone particularly.
No, and I think I don't think there's any smoke and mirrors in, or it's not any act that it's not about him. Like, he was pretty set on not being a full-time coach or a head coach again after he left Ireland. He went back to New Zealand and did the Blues for a bit and helped out and then moved up and assistant with the All Blacks. And I think it's well documented. He's got a son at home who has severe epilepsy. And he's obviously, his family have sort of managed that for a long time while he's had this very successful rugby career. And I think he was pretty set on going home and being around for all of that a bit more. So I genuinely think that he's taken this job because, as he has said, World Rugby needs a strong Wallabies and New Zealand Rugby needs Australian Rugby to be stronger. I think he's taken on for that purpose and for the challenge of trying to help, not like an ego thing, not like if I turn around Australian Rugby, like, look at me, look how good I am. Whereas I think we can pretty confidently say that Eddie probably took the job based on ego, amongst other things. So I think that's a good start. And I think he'll just that'll flow through everything he does. He'll be pragmatic in everything he does. He'll be pragmatic in the way he selects, the way he coaches, the way he trains the team. I think what he'll get the team humming from an effort point of view, which is a good starting point.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing signs, Harry. I think there's.
Yeah, I think it appeals to him. I think my study of Joe Schmidt, and I kind of went back in time and tried to do that for an article that was well received by the people in Ireland, because they said he really does know what he wants. So he listens, yes, but inside his brain, he actually is already thinking, but this is what I'm going to do. So the very weaknesses of Wallaby Rugby are the very strengths of Joe Schmidt. So resourcing a ruck post 3 phases, starter plays that from set plays, having the kind of interlocking duties, like everyone arriving at a ruck knows what they're doing in a Joe Schmidt offense. These types of things, I think, are what he brings. And then accountability, extremely low penalty count, no cards allowed. I mean, every single thing that was the trouble, even under Rennie, but also under Eddie. And then you look at the talent available. I mean, it's there. Joe Schmidt watched that Ireland match 2 years ago where the Wallabies held Ireland's attack to nothing. So I think he actually knows that there's and so you have the Lions coming, World Cup. I think Joe Schmidt's a canny operator. He said, this is the dream job in World Rugby. I get to host the Lions and a World Cup. I get to beat my fellow Kiwis because I know how to beat them. I mean,
and because I'm up for the challenge, and that'll be really interesting. I think. I like that. Really interesting. Atco, before we let you go, speaking of knowing your job, arriving at a ruck clean out, why should we slot you straight into the 89ers pod team on the right wing? What have you done to hold your
what have you worked on? What have you been training on this year? Yeah. What have you gained skills?
What were your work-ons? What were your learnings?
Well, look, at the risk of alienating myself, I didn't get much feedback, so I don't really know what I was meant to be working on. So I took that as I didn't need to work on anything.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to see bravery. I was, we were looking at the soft skills here. We're just, fitting in with a team, good with the ukulele, harmony, all that stuff. Yeah.
Can't play an instrument, but we'll get around others who can play an instrument. Not a great singer, but happy to join in and sing and create merriment. Look, based on early conversations before I officially joined this episode, huge fan of the drop goal. Incredibly undervalued in Australian rugby in particular.
That would be cool from the wing too. Get a guy on the wing doing a drop goal.
I feel like he's just repeating our points though. This is all part of the
He's so
Atkinson
skillful.
spin.
He's so skillful. Yes.
That's it. Like you want to be a coach's player. You know, coaches make the selections. You want to be a coach's player. And look,
all right.
on a rugby tour of South America, I took a shot at drop goal from 45 meters out instead of counter attack when the other team tried to clear the ball, went straight down the middle of the field.
Yeah.
We were up.
How close did you get?
We were up about 40-3.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'll take it. And it was a worm burner from 40 out all the way under the post.
That's also why I love drop goals so much, is because the attempts that fail are the worst attempts in rugby.
It's very true. It's very true. All right. Well, look, if you don't hear from us, you might need to call the manager in a few weeks' time and find out. We'll see how you go. That's the best.
Well, will you be overseas retrieving your dog? Is that why I won't be hearing from you?
I cannot confirm nor deny. Atco. Look, no, thanks very much, mate, for coming back on. It's been enjoyable chat as always. We've been wanting to get into the conversation about the docos for several weeks now. So thanks for finding some time for us in the busy schedule. We will talk to you again soon, no doubt.
You're starting, brother. Don't worry.
Yeah, good. Perfect.
Harry, fantastic to have Michael Atkinson back on the pod. Of course, you can find Atco on Twitter at Kinson88. You can hear him on the Inside Line podcast every week. And, of course, you see him pretty much every night fronting the Stand Sport coverage in Australia and, well, continuing to not want Nick McArdle's job, apparently. But, I think we know. But great to have him back.
I was dying the whole time because my back was itching. I don't know. Sometimes you want to scratch the itch on your back. And as we're now constantly on the YouTube feed and everyone always comments later, you picked your nose or whatever. So I was like, nah, I can't do it. So I was so happy to have a break. No, Atco is really nice because he seems like a guy that you'll think, oh, no, he won't be. He'll be one of those scheming, manipulative, super handsome, ambitious.
That's all true. But
he's a nice guy, down
guy,
deep, and genuine, keeps his promises, really good guy. Yeah. We have great fun. And so he's on the team. We need that character. Yeah.
Good team, man.
That's it.
Good team, man. Something a little different that we are doing this year is to dedicate 10 or so minutes every week to the various competitions around the world and touch on the major talking points as we go through them. We should go straight to the Six Nations, mate. Italy held on stoically despite intense late pressure to beat Scotland 31-29 in Rome. Their first Six Nations win at home since 2013, and Scotland's faint title hopes are now shot, and they will rue that second half collapse, no doubt. Marcus Smith's last-minute drop goal gave England a thrilling 23-22 win over Ireland at Twickenham, which kills off back-to-back Grand Slam aspirations for Ireland. And then France overpowered a fairly ordinary Wales, 45-28, and scored, it was an 8-try match over in Cardiff as well. So, I mean, it sets things up nicely this weekend, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I think there's three teams at least that will rue different things, right? Scotland will now look back and say, we ground the ball, we beat France, and we take care of business against Italy, which doesn't sound like a tall order to take care of business in Italy. And they are literally playing in the final weekend for everything. Instead, with a team that might be as good as Scotland's going to have for a while, they didn't get it done. They're back to scrapping over maybe, 2 wins, maybe 3. So I think that's bad. I'd say Italy also looks back now on that penalty goal because they would already be out of wooden spoon if RWC makes that kick. And then you have England saying, what did happen in the
penalty goal against France, you mean?
Yeah. So had that gone over, then now Italy's safe and Warren Gatlin's even grumpier than he is. So the views of my little clip of Warren Gatlin storming off of a set, which apparently was not that big a deal. He came back and did it, but that's up to 537,000 views right now, and causing BBC to have to make a comment, almost like we're in Kate Middleton's situation or something. And I'm like, it's not that big a deal, guys. I just thought it was funny that he said, I'm out. But there's pressure on these coaches. Warren Gatland tried to do a rebuild. So you're looking at Wales maybe ruining. Maybe they should have seasoned it more with some experience. But anyway, Ireland definitely had their best chance yet to get back-to-back Grand Slams, maybe ever. So you have a lot of these sort of, what ifs. But I thought the tournament stayed alive, came alive. On the game itself, leading into it, I had pinpointed some areas where England had potential because Ireland was actually getting penalized more. They were not winning the territory game as much. So in the 21 games I watched and analyzed in back, when you look at the 4 games that Ireland even struggled at all, including the loss to New Zealand, that was what happened. They were penalized. They didn't win the territory game. And then they were too ruck dependent. So if you are building your whole game on minus 3 second rucks and someone makes your rucks 4 seconds or 5 seconds, the whole thing falls apart, whereas other teams that don't depend on the ruck, they can still play. But the one question I had for you is to debate really is in the Scotland game, it was a clear slapdown near the end. Scotland was challenging to come back and try to win the game. There was a slapdown on attack, and Finn Russell, everyone saw it, and then the referee had to backtrack with the TMO, and almost 3 minutes had elapsed. They ended up saying it was actually a penalty. They even debated whether it was a penalty try. The question was whether it was penalty or penalty try. It was never whether it was or were not a slapdown. It was a knockdown forward. But they didn't go back and put the 3 minutes or 2:45 back on the clock.
Back on the clock. Yeah.
So now you're at 77, 78 minutes and you got to score one more time.
74, yeah.
So do you think, since we're already doing a reset there, that you should also just go back to the time?
But that shouldn't have been time on. Like time off, it is time off when they go to
they kept playing. So the sequence continued. And in the background, I think the ref had said to the TMO, check that, look at that.
Yeah.
And whatever, but at some point they stopped, and it was like, that's difficult now, because if you're going to go back and pretend that that's where you were, then everything that happened after that doesn't matter. So why not just go back to 76 minutes instead of 78? I don't know.
It's interesting because it's still live time. Tackles are still made, passes are still thrown, stats are still being recorded. Stats are still being recorded. So, tackles are still being made, points can theoretically still be scored. But yes, if they then go back and say, no, that's a penalty.
It just seems like the justice of it, because otherwise the slapdown actually works. It's like, it's a penalty, but they did score.
On one hand, it's like the game should go back to that point. But on the other hand, the game kept playing. So you can't really do that. It's a good question. It is a good question. I will give you that. The table's interesting. So Ireland are 4 points clear of England, who are 1 clear of Scotland and France, who are 4 clear of Italy.
Yeah.
Italy could beat Wales and join France or Scotland on 11 points. They could go to 12 points, of course.
Right.
If Scotland beat Ireland and England beat France with a bonus point,
they went to numbers
games.
England
win the Six Nations.
Yeah, so I think England's best friend right now is Scotland.
Yes.
And Scotland can actually do this, but they would have to beat Ireland like 38-0 or something.
Well, the points differential is too big. Ireland are like plus 80 and Scotland are plus 10.
So they have to win something else. So
they have to win by 95.
So Scotland's job is denial,
near impossible
to denying and give their friends in England a chance. So it's very interesting. We're back to the Celtic collusion problem.
I can't see Scotland going out of their way to help England on anything.
On the other hand, it does seem like there are some glitches now in the Ireland scheme, and it has to do with what happens to any team that is that good. Ireland has been one of the best teams of the century. Their 17-game streak is unparalleled, but it's difficult to keep refreshing ideas, and everyone's studying you till the cows come home, so they know exactly what to do. So it's interesting. I don't think Scotland has the kind of game style to trouble Ireland. I think England, South Africa, big physical teams. The French, when they were on at home, I think
they have. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting final weekend. The 3 games all back to back. Starts with Wales and Italy in Cardiff. Then we go to Dublin for Ireland, Scotland, and then France, England, La Cronche.
And the 8-9 combo has an incredible competition.
Yeah, right. Tell me what I need to do in order to win this competition, in order to join you in Ireland this weekend.
Okay, so Brett, you have to be somehow in Ireland to
right.
to it. But you, if you were,
so
and you
get there,
and you wrote the best Celtic haiku. So we're looking for Celts, Irish or Scots, to write a haiku that extols.
How many entries have you had so far since you launched?
19, and 19. 7 of them were just dog shit. But there's about 8 or 9 that are really good poetry, and there's 2 or 3 that are front runners. A couple of guys you know, I'm not going to reveal yet, but they're strong. It's going to be tough.
Am I part of the judging panel?
Yes. So what I'm going to do is get I'll do the first. I'll vet, and I'll get the top 5
list. Okay.
And then we'll do it on socials, and we'll compare. But so on Thursday at noon, London time, we will announce the winner of a lower South Stand ticket to come watch the game with me.
Okay, so this is genuine. If you want to see Ireland, Scotland at the Aviva with Harry, jump on his socials, follow his 7 or 8 point terms of entry, and
prove you're a human.
Genuinely win a ticket for this weekend.
You got to be human, and you got to write a haiku.
Yeah, you've got to prove that you're not a robot. Yeah,
and I prefer that you're shaped like a 9, just so that you're not taking away my seat.
So you don't feel out of whack. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. We'll touch on Super Rugby. We've sort of hit it fairly well already. I got 3 out of 6 last weekend, and that felt like a good return. Like, it was actually a really good weekend. It was a good weekend.
That's amazing, because I just think the whole rugby weekend was topsy-turvy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes. Quick question, and I think we'll touch on this each week. So maybe simple answer. Who's the best Australian team, and who's the best New Zealand team after this week just gone?
The Reds. The Reds are the best because, last week was so Tars, but this week it's all Reds.
Yeah,
we're just in knee-jerk city. The Hurricanes appear to be the real deal.
They do. They definitely do. So the table after 3 rounds, the Hurricanes are the only undefeated side. They're 3 points clear. The Chiefs, Reds, and Melbourne Rebels all have. They ran out the top 4. Blues, Highlanders, Brumbies all have 2 wins as well. And the Waratahs, Drua, Moana Pacifica have 1 win. The Crusaders and the Force sit 11th and 12th currently, and you've got good odds pre-season to have picked that, I'd imagine.
That's weird. That's weird to say.
Very weird. Yeah, very weird to say. This weekend, there's some really good games this weekend. Crusaders, Hurricanes on Friday night. Rebels, Reds in Melbourne. Force, Moana over in Perth. Highlanders, Brumbies kick things off on Saturday in Dunedin. Chiefs, Drua in Hamilton, and Waratahs Blues in Sydney Saturday night to round out round 4 could be a ripping game. I've got no doubt.
Where's the Canes Crusaders match?
That is in Christchurch, I believe.
Yes, it is. You would think it's almost become like they just have to do something right now.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this for round 4, but it feels like must win for the Crusaders. Like, you can't lose a comp in March, but you can't win a comp in March, but
to go 0-4,
0-4, that's not a great comeback. To Japan very quickly, the Panasonic Wild Knights went 5 points clear on top after a 14-16 point win over third place Toshiba. Kobelco Kobe Steelers are 4th after a big win over Matt To'omua's Mitsubishi Dynabors, and they've now dropped a win behind that mid-table pack that we've been talking about for the last few weeks. In Major League Rugby in the States, after 2 rounds, NOLA Gold are the only unbeaten team in the Eastern Conference. They had a win over Anthem RC. In West, Houston, Seattle are both 2 from 2 after wins over Rugby FC, LA, and Miami, respectively. 5 of the 6 teams in the West Conference have at least 1 win, which is interesting. Including your Dallas Jackals, they're 1-1.
Yeah, I went out to the Choctaw Stadium for the final 30 minutes of that. I've been exploring ideas about malls and lineouts. All my plans came unstuck, and we lost.
And your services are no longer required.
I've got a plan, though. Yeah.
Just give the manager a ring in a couple of weeks, and we'll let you know whether you need didn't
See, when I was saying the X's, you thought it was O's. It was the other way around.
Yeah. It's a simple mistake. The ERC, the top 14, the Premiership are all back the weekend of 22, 23, 24 March. So check your local guides, I think, as they say in the business. Break. But a little bit of news over the last 7 days as we wrap up episode 5. A couple of little things that we missed as we were recording last week, funnily enough. New Zealand referee Brendan Pickerel, I think, shocked Super Rugby and New Zealand Rugby by deciding to hang up the whistle with immediate effect. He did the Melbourne game last week and was a TMO at the Rugby World Cup as well, but did his last game of Super Rugby. There's a few little whispers he might be about to take up a job with World Rugby, in fact, which is what's led to his decision. But, I mean, it's certainly a shock to see a referee pulling away, after 3 rounds. That's an interesting one. The Crusaders also confirmed, we mentioned former Scarlets and Welsh international winger Johnny McNichol. The Crusaders confirmed that he's heading back to the Red and Blacks as an injury cover for Will Jordan, who's going to miss the whole season. So that now makes sense that we wondered about last week. The judiciary last week, Geordie Barrett got 3 weeks. Chiefs prop Jared Prophet got 3 weeks as well, both for high tackles. Moana Pacifica winger Nigel R. Wong was downgraded to a warning. Barrett and Prophet are both eligible for tackle skill though as well. So it's 6 down to 3, down to 2, and I hate all of that stuff. Julian Savia became the leading try scorer in Super Rugby history when he scored in the 49th minute against the Melbourne Rebels on Friday night in Hamilton, and he scored it travelling forwards, not backwards, like his brother. So, conventional try scoring, which I like. The fixtures for the 2025 Six Nations have been confirmed and will kick off at the Stade de France in Paris on January 31, with France hosting Wales. Scotland will host Italy on opening weekend. England will head to Dublin to face Ireland. But the most interesting story, I think, over the last 7 days, mate, is that World Cup winning Springboks fly half Elton Yankees could be back playing rugby despite the small matter of his 4-year doping ban after he tested positive to clenbuterol last year. He was given till January of this year to exercise his right to have his case heard before an independent doping hearing panel, but he never did that. And the fresh twist is that the World Anti-Doping Authority has suspended the accreditation for the South African Doping Control Laboratory in Bloemfontein. And now, according to a report on RugbyPass late last week, the Lions are ready to swoop on Yankees if he's now allowed to return.
My official reaction to the story is... And that's the Bloemfontein doping sound as well. That's the sound of doping in Bloemfontein. Hey, the big story from South Africa is that Rassie Erasmus is now a doctor. He has been awarded an honorary professorship, PhD, for services rendered and great. And this is serious in the cause of transformation, of diversity, of inclusion, because that's something he has done for all of his flaws and faults. Rassie loves everyone as they are and brings people from non-traditional backgrounds into rugby. And so now it's interesting because if the World Rugby wants to ban people coming onto the field, he can say, I'm a doctor. Can't you see me falling?
Yeah, no, very good. Very good.
And he'll have like the white lab coat on, and he'll have loopholes.
It's just crazy enough.
Loophole rhymes with loophole, and he is the man.
He is. If anyone can find a loophole, it will be him. But, mate, that is us done for another episode of the 8-9 Combo. How do you rate us for episode 5?
Strong. And on upward trajectory, much like Australian rugby.
Yeah, it feels like it. So thank you all out there in rugby pod world who have found us. If you are new to our work, then welcome. But if you know us from the last few years, then thank you so much for following us. And speaking of following, the pod is obviously on the socials. Check the show notes as well for the full listing on your pod platform. But you'll find us on Twitter, on Insta, and at YouTube at 8-9 Combo. And you'll find full video versions of the podcast every week on YouTube. There's stuff going up on TikTok. There's stuff going up on Insta. So give us a follow, a like, a subscribe, interact with the pod directly, but rate us and share us as well. We're starting from scratch, so any previous ratings and rankings you might have left for us on our former podcast obviously haven't followed over. So if your pod platform allows it, please do leave ratings and reviews, and YouTube definitely does as well. But it all helps, and it helps people who find the pod after you, see what it's like as well. So do check that out. About 50 5-star reviews across Spotify and Apple already so far, including this one from Hugh96 on Apple Podcasts, who said, these guys always get quality guests to chat rugby with. So can't argue with the science. Can't argue with that at all.
That's almost a haiku, though, by the way.
Almost.
That review.
Yeah. We want to see haiku reviews in future weeks. Harry and I remain on the socials in our usual places, at Harry Baldy Jones and at BMC Sport. And whilst you'll find Harry's written musings still on the Roar a couple of times a month, you'll find me now writing weekly Australian columns for RugbyPass. Again, like, follow, subscribe on your pod platform of choice, and make sure you get every episode as soon as it drops. This is the 8-9 combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed, coming from the podcast double act you already had. I'm Brett McKay. He's Harry Jones, and we will be back in your ears next week.
Come play with us. That made my dog